everybody who's submitting them. And I'd like to try to ask a few questions based on those, but kind of generalize a little bit, since I think the questions were very relevant from both the federal and the district level. And the first questions that were coming in had to do with teachers and how are we arranging for teachers to have the time they need to do all that's needed for this transition, the professional development, the ongoing supports. And one of the questions Karen said, well, what is the U.S. Department of Ed going to be doing to help with all that? So let's start with you from the federal level, Karen, about what you see coming from the federal level to support teachers in this transition. And then we'll turn to Mark and have him say a little more about what he sees possible from the more local level. Karen, back to you.
Sure. So first of all, when I think about teacher support and professional development, the first thing that I think we need to do is focus. So the part about teachers learning to use the technology, I think we can sort of take that off the table. And one of the reasons is because we know, I think, that people will learn the technology as they need it. And the most efficient way of doing that is not in a class where people all sit down together and learn something because it's an in-service day and that kind of thing. That's one thing. Second thing is we need to just talk to teachers more and more about how they're using technology in their personal lives and leverage that. So whether they're using, Facebook or Google, to search, or Bing to search, or whatever they're using, whether they're shopping, whether they're searching, whether they are, using photographs and enhancing photographs to share with people. However they're using technology in their personal life, we need to remind them that is like part of what it means to be kind of literate in the sense. But the third thing is the important part, and that is, how does my teaching change and how does learning change in my classroom when people have access to technology, when my students have access? And that should be the focus of our professional development, just really thinking very clearly about what kinds of things change, what's the same, what's different, and what could I do to support my students now that they have access to the technology. The second thing, the one thing that we have been doing also is we know that we spend, I can't remember the number, but well over $1 billion a year on professional development from the federal government. Well over $1 billion, I should know the number, I think it's over $2 billion actually, that we spend every single year on professional development. And the amount that we think that we get from that in terms of improvements is probably fairly limited. So we're definitely interested in all the different ways that people can learn. And so we ran the Connected Educator Month in August to say, what does it look like if teachers are fully connected to their peers and to experts and to other people? So and how does that support them in their professional learning and their professional development? And the idea was that if people can develop their personal learning network, then what they need to improve every single day will be more at their fingertips. And so we want to help everybody do that. There was a comment earlier on that said, in honor of Connected Educator Month, go grab a colleague and bring them on to this webinar. And whether it's this webinar or something else of interest to them that will support them in their classroom this year, we want to shine a big spotlight on all the opportunities there are to learn together online. In August, we estimate there were about 35,000 hours of professional development freely given and freely taken by, thousands of educators and over 150 different organizations that supported that. So it's interesting, and I think what we need to do, just like students, we want to think about personalized learning and how they can learn more and better, and make it more focused on what they need. We need to do that also, thinking about the teachers as continuous learners as well. And then, Mark, hopefully you have some very specific things to say.
Well, thanks, Karen, and I think great reference points that there's a significant effort at the national level with the U.S. Department of Ed to meet the needs. Some of the things that we've done, drilling down to the local level, our school board took what I believe was a courageous step to blend into our calendar early release days several times a year, almost twice a month. We have early release days where we really focus at the grade level, by the department level, with individual teachers, where there's dedicated and focused time for continuous professional development, not just around using digital tools, but using information to enhance the overall productivity in the classroom. Now, we also have blended in a summer experience that's volunteer, it's a volunteer basis in Mooresville, but we have over a 90% participation rate. Teachers come and have an opportunity again for PD that is aligned to their particular needs. So we've differentiated the model, and then there's tremendous interest, and then it's also built around a collaborative experience, and also a practical use experience. I also think that it's imperative that we focus opportunities for administrators, tech staff, and everyone involved in the district for continuous learning. And this goes back to the cultural affectation, building a sense of responsibility within the resource base where there is a commitment to a learning community. And one of the things that we've seen teachers and students and administrators and the community have responded to this sense that we're all learning together. But I would implore districts and other leaders and other participants today to accentuate the importance of a continuous systemic focus on professional development that aligns with the focus on achievement, focus on using digital resources, and ultimately on building a stronger learning culture for all involved.
Okay, that's great. Thank you again, Karen and Mark. We have lots of questions. We'll get through as many as we can, and then we'll be able to continue some of the discussion online after. Again, I'm going to group several questions. There were a number of them on how to move forward with the 4 C's, critical thinking, communication, collaboration, and creativity. And I know many of us have struggled with the importance of those. Certainly the business community will always focus on those as important. And then the issues of how do we assess those. So the general question for both Karen and Mark is how do we move further, faster forward with the 4 C's, both in terms of teaching and learning, and then how we deal with the complex issues of assessment in those areas. Karen, we'll turn it back to you.
Right. So first of all, this is, for people who know me, this is absolutely core to what I've been focused on for years, is thinking about these kinds of skills and these kinds of attributes and how we build them in. Because I think for 2 reasons. One, I think they're part of the engagement strategy. As we get students to be more kind of asking good questions, inquiry-based, thinking critically, solving complex problems that have something to do with the local context. As we get students to be communicators, as we get students to work with others, those are all things that help students kind of lean forward and be fully engaged. So that's the first thing. The second thing I think is we need to demand and ask for curriculum that is fully tagged, and the kinds of assignments and the kinds of environments and the kinds of learning situations that fully support those kinds of things. One of the things that I think that is interesting is as we move to the distribution power, leverage the distribution power of the internet, we can find and better share the kinds of engagements that do fully support students developing those kinds of skills. So the development of those, I think, is kind of fully in the, what are the kinds of engagements and what are the kinds of things we ask students to do every day. And the assessment of those is much thornier. We're not going to have, I don't think, a standardized test that, I think people are trying, right, to say, how can you measure creativity? How can you measure collaboration? There's some interesting work. I think some of the most interesting work is being done by EdLeader 21, and they're creating, very complete rubrics and articulations of those skills, so that as we're looking at student work and as we're looking at the kinds of things teachers are assigning and providing in terms of environments for their students, they'll be able to, compare with the rubric and figure out if they're on the right track. So I think that's one thing. And I think, again, then people also should be able to share these things online and have other people look at these and thumbs up, thumbs down, bump them up, bump them down with respect to how well they begin to develop those skills.
Okay, over to you, Mark.
Thanks, Glenn. Again, I think Karen has articulated with a great deal of relevance the importance of a developmental aspect to our work, both with assessments and the instructional model. I know when Karen was visiting Mooresville, one of her comments, she said, you can't tell the front of the classroom. We have moved away from a didactic whole group instruction to a project-based, personalized effort, and there's a lot of independent work going on. In fact, if you ask our students, most would say, what do you spend a great deal of your time, most of your time? A lot would say research. I'm investigating things that I want to know that are aligned with the curriculum that we're teaching. And I do think we have an incredible opportunity that students have the means to access and connect, to collaborate at levels way beyond what we could even imagine 10 years ago as part of a daily experience, as part of a way to advance their personal interest. And I do think a real key, one of the things that we are so excited about is seeing a sense of obligation to work in collaborative teams. But one of the things we've modeled, Lowe's Home Improvement has its corporate offices in Mooresville, and we've studied their workplace. They work in project teams, and we're modeling the same type of project team work. But we were extremely proud. Recently, we had a group of students that won a prize. They were second in the nation on a collaborative project with a video project team. And a group of students that work together, incredibly creative. And I think we're just on the cusp of some incredibly exciting opportunities to build the collaborative networks among teachers and students and create a sense of personal pursuit of learning that will enhance overall productivity.
Okay, thank you. That's great. Let me ask a follow-up, and we'll start with Mark on this round because I think it's more at the district level, but then we'll certainly invite you to comment, Karen. We've talked some about teachers, students, content, but we also all know that the principal plays an absolutely essential role in any school reform. We've had a question come in about what do principals look for in the classroom, and also what kinds of professional development, support, guidance have you provided to your principals in Mooresville?
Thanks, Glenn. And I think it's a real key question. And in fact, we are constantly aligning our work with the notion that our principals provide support and enable teachers to work up to their potential. So just recently, we've designed a new rubric, and we'd be glad to share. We actually shared some work with some other researchers and with Tom Greaves and developed a rubric of look-fors to use, that our principals use in terms of coming to a classroom. Now, we're really focusing on second-order change. In fact, on National Digital Learning Day last year, we did a quick view of every district, every classroom in the district, and part of our investigative work that day was to look for second-order change, doing things that you could not do without the rich use of digital resources. But I think another thing that goes back to that culture is the role of the principal and assistant principal for constant encouragement, a sense of providing teachers with support that's differentiated based upon their level need, but also understanding the importance that providing time and incentive for teachers to collaborate. And when there's the leadership for collaboration and a focus on every child every day, then I really think that we see a synergy between the work in the classroom, the principal, in the sense that we're all in. And I really do believe collaboration as a model at every level is a key, and a culture where there's caring for students and caring for faculty and staff.
Thank you, Mark. Karen, would you like to add anything to that?
Nope, that was brilliant.
Okay, thank you. I agree. I want to get through a number of more questions. We have so many good questions coming in. There's also a set of questions on the technology side, particularly around how can we move forward with equitable access, making sure all students have 24/7 access, and certainly this pertains everywhere, but particularly in our more rural communities. Karen, perhaps there's some things from the federal level you'd like to talk about first?
Sure. So I guess the main thing I'm going to say, and it's important to say, is that this is probably the most important part of this entire conversation, that we have got to figure out the equity play. If we think about, if we compare it to, when the printing press was, developed and books came into being, it became more and more apparent over time, a long time probably, that the ability to read was an incredibly important attribute in order to continuously learn from books. We are now at a point where the opportunity to access the internet and access to whether it's health information, learning opportunities, online courses, explanations, tutors, whatever it is, that opportunity to access those kinds of things is, part and parcel of being able to read when the goal was to be able to learn from books. So it's incredibly important. So first of all, we can't say, if kids don't have it at school, at home, we shouldn't do it at school. So the first thing is schools are under our purview, and we should make sure that every single student, regardless of socioeconomic status, has access at school. And then the second thing is to begin to work on home access. And there are lots of different strategies, and these strategies will be as diverse as this country. Some places, like in Mooresville, you'll be able to send computers home. Some places, you'll look for computers that can actually reside in the home. In some places, you'll leverage, smartphones or other kinds of things that may already be available to the family. In some places, you'll access the low-cost internet through the Connect to Compete program or the Internet Essentials program, and try to figure out how all of your students can get home access, even if they are, qualify for free or reduced lunch. So there are so many different strategies. One of the, and then of course, for the in-school part, we're also looking at places that are doing bring your own device, and in some cases even bring your own network, leveraging the cellular network in school and out of school. We've seen some districts that share a data plan, and so students who have their own access at home can leverage their own Wi-Fi at home or other places, but when they don't have access, then they share a data plan with the other people who need a shared data plan. So there are multiple strategies that will play out in a whole variety of ways across this country, depending on lots of different attributes of the community. But it's something that we do need to pay particular attention to and focus on. One last thing, I think there were a few comments about broadband. And we know now E-rate is $2.2 billion a year plus. This year it's well over $3 billion that's focused, that pays for internet connectivity to schools and libraries. So what we know we need to do is figure out how to transition those connections to a higher bandwidth, to a broadband connection speed, and that's something else that we're working on. And there's an organization called Education Superhighway, educationsuperhighway.org. They've launched a broadband speed test so that people inside of schools can click on that test, and we want to get millions of data points potentially, so that we can begin to understand what the actual speed of devices on networks in schools across the country actually is. And we want to do that so that we can improve the procurement possibilities, so that we can improve the connection, so that we can begin to understand what the strategies are for making the connection as good as it can be, and again to support the advancements in broadband for every single school.
Great, thank you, Karen.
Thanks, Glenn. I would emphasize that, tie back to something that Karen mentioned, that is that I really believe we have a moral imperative, both as a country and states and individual school districts, to understand that to address the equity issue, it also means addressing a digital divide, a hope divide. And one of the things that we saw in Mooresville, I'm very proud of this. 5 years ago, we had a 30-point gap between African-American students and Caucasian students. And this past year, we didn't close the gap, we erased the gap. In fact, at some schools, our highest performing students were African-American male students. And I think a real key is that the students were provided with the opportunity. There was a sense of this great expectation, and students rose to the occasion. Now, we've looked at a variety of districts providing help, but I do believe that there are models around the country that are absolutely doable. And I think that if we want to prepare students for their future and not our past, it's essential that we understand that digital literacy and working in an environment of collaboration online is part of the world they live in, and we have to embrace it and provide for it.
Okay. I'm going to take the opportunity after that response, Mark, to ask a specific question that one of our participants sent in that really was what originally led me to work in technology years ago, which is, what are you doing in Mooresville to use technology to meet the needs of special education students?
I saw that question, and I get so excited just hearing that question, because I really think it has one of the greatest implications for that we have seen for our students. And I'll give another data point. At third grade in Mooresville, our special needs students are performing, and these are all state tests. And the math test in North Carolina is an application test. It has shortcomings. Their performance is over 90%. And I think a real key, some of the unintended benefits are in terms of organization for LD students, using for students with needs with multiple learning modalities, whether it's audio, text, opportunities for visually impaired students. So at every single level, we have seen direct and impressive benefits using digital resources, and quite frankly, we have been able to see students be very successful that previously could have never been successful because of the personalized functionality that we see with new content that has great implications.
Great. Thank you again, Mark. We probably only have time for one more question and a couple of notes at the end. And there were so many good questions. We will put more of them into the discussion forum. And we know that both Mark and Karen are very busy, but we'll respond among ourselves, and then we'll contact them for some more information on specific questions. Let me try to summarize a few questions. Some asked about the scale of the changing the cultures in the schools, and others asked about what are our metrics as we work with our communities. How do we really help get buy-in for the scale of the changing culture in the school, and what metrics and measures can we use to help show that we really are moving forward in productive ways? Mark looks ready to answer, so let's start with Mark, and then we'll turn to you, Karen.
Thanks, Glenn. And I think this is such an important question as districts and schools and communities look at advancing transformational change. One, I think it's a matter of communication, and we approach this by going out to our community, the Chamber of Commerce, elected leaders, business communities, parent advisory, teacher advisory, and having large discussions about what do we want, how can we do it, what it would cost, the investment, and leverage that communication to help build our plan. And I think that nothing can take the place of what the old town meetings, and again, in large districts that would have to be segmented. But Glenn and I both have seen the same work done, whether it was in the great work in Maine or the work that was done previously in Henrico County, Virginia. But I do think that building those communication networks, that framework of getting it done, and then ultimately the investment, the return on this investment. Use Mooresville as an example. Our graduation rate of over 90% from a graduation of 67%. And I think that translates to our business community, to business advancement, and ultimately I truly believe that our parents see the sky a little bit bluer today, and opportunity is much greater because of this sense that we've all pulled together to build a better framework for our students and community.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Karen, any additions?
I think the only addition, and I think Mark kind of covered it earlier in his slides, but just thinking about all of the different data points that you can capture. So test scores really fall short, obviously, of giving us all of the information that we want about the kinds of things that are happening in a classroom. So some of the secondary indicators of engagement, whether it be behavior notices or teacher surveys, student surveys, parent surveys, and really listening and capturing what's going on. Also, at school board meetings, having, showing student work, having a continuous focus on the kind of learning that's taking place as a result of having better access and kind of a different kind of a culture. I mean, it's a tough thing because every, adult and student they have some kind of muscle memory about what it feels like to be in a school, and if it feels different, they feel like they're missing something or they feel like something might be wrong. So really having a solid communication strategy and focusing in on all the different kinds of data points and information. I mean, Mark included scholarships and some of those kinds of things, the kinds of things that actually will help people. I want to add one other thing, and that is that in the places where technology has gone home and where it's the family's first home computer, right? So it's the school, it's gotten into the home because of work that the school has done. One of the opportunities is to fully engage the rest of the family, the parents, in the caregivers, whoever, in also leveraging that technology for learning. So again, whether it be for health information or access to government services, access to job applications, whatever it might be, in fully engaging the parents and the family members at the level that they're at is also, I think, a really significant communication strategy.
Great. At this point, I'd like you all to join me in thanking Karen and Mark. This has been a wonderful, informative session. I'm sure we have several more hours of discussion. You don't get the feeling of an applause from an audience in front of you, but folks, under the emoticons, the little smiley face, there is an applause button. So please join me, a number of you already are, in a round of applause for Karen and Mark. It's wonderful to work with both of them, and they really are providing very important leadership roles locally and nationally. And Mark, of course, I consider you a national leader based upon your great work locally. A couple of things in the remaining 2 minutes. One is, as I mentioned, we will be gathering the resources and continuing the discussion on the EPIC-Ed website, epiced.org. You will find under discussions a follow-up discussion for the Karen Cator and Mark Edwards webinar. In the next few days, we'll also get the link to the recording of this session if you'd like to go back or recommend it to any of your friends or colleagues, and we will point to resources there. One resource that would be very valuable to us all that will not be linked there until January, but I promise Mark certainly deserves a plug. He has a book coming out called Every Child, Every Day, to be published by Pearson in January, about all the good work that he's done in all that he's learned in Mooresville and elsewhere through his outstanding career. So please look for that. We will list it as soon as it's available. And we have, I believe, 1 or 2 other things to close down. There are additional EPIC-Ed webinars coming up. You can go to the site for those, but I do want to point out that a week from today at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, we will have a very exciting webinar with Governor Bev Perdue, Governor of North Carolina, who's done lots of work leading the state in education and technology, and former Governor of West Virginia, Bob Wise, who many of you know leads the Alliance for Education Excellence, is involved in the digital learning now work. So please look for that one as well as the other events. And I believe we are there. I'm looking at my colleagues to see if there's anything else I'm supposed to do. Okay, if you look in the chat space, you will see a link to a very quick survey to provide us with some feedback about this webinar that will help us as we move forward to additional ones. We are at 3:59 on a session scheduled to end at 4 o'clock, so I thank you all for joining us. We hope to see you again online, and please join the online discussion on the EPIC-Ed website. Thank you all.